So this video will take a little bit of a look at uses and gratifications. Just a handful of slides on this. I wanted to use this one as kind of a primer in the uses and grats perspective. In general, what uses and gratifications focuses on is motivations. So what brings us to our content? In terms of a sports fan, what brings us to either the arena or watching it or being a part of the culture in general? Uses and gratifications might look at what motivates us to gravitate towards a certain identity as a sports fan. Largely, though, the uses and gratifications perspective has really been about media usage, why we use, why we watch certain shows, or what we're trying to accomplish when we watch TV, what we're trying to accomplish when we go onto social media, what needs are being fulfilled by the media outlet that we're choosing. In case of sports fans, again, it is what needs are being fulfilled by participating in sports. A little bit of a closer look. So as I just mentioned, we're looking at why people watch or why people participate in sports culture. What needs do they fulfill? And generally speaking, this body of literature focuses on a handful of different types of needs, some being social interaction, or consuming something that will benefit a social interaction later on. So I might watch Monday Night Football on a Monday night during the NFL season because I know at the workplace, around the water cooler or wherever in the offices, a lot of my colleagues will be talking about the Monday Night Football game. So I watch it with the idea that it's fulfilling the need for me to be able to socially interact with colleagues at the workplace or at school. Other types of gratifications include entertainment, just for the sort of this sheer thrill or enjoyment of watching something. Arousal, getting us excited, emotionally invested, sort of getting the heart pumping. Escape, if we are sort of overwhelmed with the chores of everyday living, watching a football game for a few hours could be seen as just kind of forgetting about it all and escaping into the media or into sort of sports fan culture. There are a handful of others that pop up every now and then in the literature, but these are really sort of the main ones. And now, it might be useful in thinking of our consumption or our participation in sports fan culture in terms of these uses and gratifications, what we get out of it, what motivates us to be a part of it. But a major critique of uses and gratifications is that most of us aren't really that thoughtful when we are choosing what media to consume, what shows to watch. We're not that thoughtful or planful, perhaps, in thinking about, well, I need to watch Monday Night Football to be able to talk to my colleagues. It's usually just sort of what's on TV and just kind of surf around, not really thinking through this might benefit my social interactions later on in life. It might be closer to arousal if it's watching certain types of sort of high energy action films or a horror film, something like that. But many of these we're simply not that thoughtful when we are selecting sort of what to watch or what to consume. So maybe we could say something not necessarily like I feel the need to escape. I'm going to watch the Packers. Maybe it's more of a subconscious thing, like it's been a busy week, it's been a hectic week. It's just kind of my unwind time as I sit down on Sundays to watch the Packers. So just keep in mind, as we're talking about uses and gratifications, it might have some utility in helping us understand potential motivations or helping us talk about sort of what someone might be getting out of sports fan culture, but rarely is it exercised in that sort of direct way by the participants themselves. Again, most people anyway, don't go into a night of TV consumption or sports consumption thinking in terms of the uses and gratifications. I'm going to watch the playoffs tonight so I can have better dialogue with my boss tomorrow. Rarely does it work quite so perfectly. Some of the research that has been done applying uses and gratifications to sports have focused on a handful of types of gratifications or types of motivations that draw people. In terms of attending games or attending tailgating or physical events, the uses in Grats, items that usually get drawn out are social interaction, so interacting with other sort of like-minded fans, as well as arousal, the simple sort of thrill and joy of being at an event, hearing the crowd cheer, going nuts at a touchdown or a huge three-pointer or something like that. In terms of watching on TV, the gratifications sought out are a combination of escape and information seeking. There's probably some arousal also with that as well, but mostly focused on research has shown that it's been focused on information seeking. So just liking the numbers, the statistics, the wins and loss, getting that sort of raw data as you watch on TV. And then escape is unplugging after a long day, coming home, watching an NBA playoff game for a couple hours, or watching anything really for a couple hours without having to think about it, kind of letting the problems of the day or the woes of life sort of drift away for a couple hours or so. Now, the particular study that you guys read going into these lectures focused on NASCAR fans, and they pulled out some motivations that aren't typically seen with uses and gratification studies, but they came out with their sort of laundry list of 6 items. Some of them seem very obvious: entertainment. Perhaps attending the event would tie in with social interaction, watching on TV for a few hours, escaping. Family interaction I thought was an interesting one to pull out. So watching NASCAR as a better way to relate to family members. Perhaps it's a family event that they all sit down and watch the race together. Some fans are interested in the performance and aesthetics of it. Perhaps the performance of the automobiles themselves or the athletes in the cars. An interesting one that I found that I think ties in really well with a lot of what we'll talk about in this class is self-esteem. So picking out a particular driver or team of drivers that they can cheer for, and then their self-esteem relates to the success or non-success of those drivers. I found that to be really interesting as people watching or consuming something to get a self-esteem boost. And if we think about this in terms of the previous lecture, in terms of identity, choosing maybe what sports to be a fan of or what teams or individuals within those sports, being very selective if your self-esteem is based in part on the success or failures of those athletes, you would think you'd want to choose ones that win a lot. But perhaps self-esteem is a bit nuanced in there in terms of loyalty or why we choose which drivers in this case to cheer for. Does their personality resonate with us somehow? I just found it to be a fascinating finding that their self-esteem is a driving factor in their own consumption of NASCAR. There was a bit of nuance between the types of fans. So female fans of NASCAR scored highest on family interaction and social interaction, and the sort of more intense fans scored highest on self-esteem and entertainment factors. So the females, perhaps as a way to continue to bond with family members, maybe it's an interest of their children or their spouse, and therefore they are sort of pursuing NASCAR as a means to be able to interact with them and sort of be a part of the fun of watching an event. And for the more intense fans, those are the ones that are really tied to the self-esteem aspect of it. So they're really bought in, and they feel the wins and losses very personally, or maybe not wins or losses, but the places that their favorite drivers finish. They feel that very personally in terms of their self-esteem. So to wrap all of this up, uses and gratifications works well when we're trying to think about motivations of fans or what fans might be getting out of it. It doesn't really work well if we're trying to apply it sort of in the moment as fans are making these choices. They generally don't think of things in the uses and gratifications terms. One other issue in sort of an academic standpoint of it is it's non-predictive, meaning that we only really know what's going on after the fact. The theory itself doesn't make sort of linear progression or any sort of steps of if this happens, then this is definitely going to happen. That's just not how the perspective works. So uses and grats, again, maybe useful in our conversations about motivations of fans, but less useful in terms of making sort of academic theoretical hypotheses and things like that.